Monday, 9th November, 1987, 10 minutes past 8. Southern Angola, 3 kilometers northeast of FAPLA 16 Brigade. A South African tank fires. 1 minute later, a second one does. 2 T-55s stop where they stand. The hull under those guns is second-hand. South Africa sold its best Centurions abroad in 1961 and bought used hulls back from Jordan and India to replace them. The gun is not the one it was designed around. Neither is the engine. The bush is thick enough to hide a brigade. It looked wrong. The hull was British. Drawn during the Second World War for a plane in Northern Europe. In 1961, the best of them went to Switzerland, and the money went toward Mirage fighters. Venter puts the sale at 100 tanks, the museum record at 110. Either way, it virtually halved the country's tank capability, and the replacements arrived second-hand, without turrets or guns. What the workshops turned them into was a rebuild, hull and track skirts. Nothing else survived. The first version kept the old British 20-pounder, judged inadequate against the T-54 and T-55. That is why a second version exists. 11 tanks went north in 1987. In front of them was what was left of the FAPLA brigades that had come out of Quito Cuanavale. Major Andre Retief, who commanded them, calls 11 hopelessly too few for the task that awaited. Published accounts say 13. Retief has corrected them. Those 2 kills are the first by South African tank crews since 1945. Across the 9th and the 11th, FAPLA's 16 Brigade is hurt badly enough that it never appears in the Angolan order of battle again. On 25th February 1988, a battle group commander leads an attack from a turret whose gun will not fire and goes in anyway. And across the whole war, South Africa loses 3 tanks, all on one morning, all to mines, none to an enemy gun. Its name was the Olifant. How many times can an army be ordered to attack the same prepared position before the tank gets the blame for the order? 3 things answer that. An army that sold its tanks and bought them back used. A rebuild done under an embargo its own policies brought down. And Tumpo, where the same ground was attacked 3 times. Most of the killing in this campaign was done by artillery. This is the story of the tanks inside it. Hold on to one figure. 11 tanks against 8 brigades. Start with the same morning, where the wrong vehicle met a tank. Monday, 9th November, 1987, late morning, 3 kilometers south, at FAPLA 16 Brigade's main position. Combat Group Charlie's tanks have already killed twice this morning. B Company's rattles are pinned in front of the FAPLA positions, drawing fire from everything the brigade has. A T-55 comes out of the bush at less than 60 meters, close enough for the 2 crews to see each other's faces. The rattle carries infantry. Its cannon is meant for infantry. Nothing about it is built for the next few seconds. Rifleman Adrian Tom is on the 20mm gun. He stays on it. He puts about 20 armor-piercing rounds into the tank just below the commander's cupola. Enough go through to set off an explosion inside. A cannon for infantry, and it killed a tank. Then the Rattel's commander orders the infantry section out. A second T-55 fires, and the Rattel is knocked out where it stands. Tom is killed. So is the driver, Rifleman Muhlenbeck. Rifleman Klassen, from the section that is just debussed, is killed by small arms fire moments later. Tom is awarded the honoris crux. He does not live to receive it. That should not have been possible. To understand why it was, you have to go back to a vote taken in New York in November 1977. New York, November 1977. The Security Council passes Resolution 418, and the arms embargo on South Africa becomes mandatory. The one before it, in 1963, had been voluntary, and the trade carried on. This one did not. The embargo existed because of apartheid and a documented record of state violence, and on tanks it worked exactly as intended. From that vote onward, no member state could legally sell the country a replacement. The tanks that already existed were the only tanks there would ever be. In 1987, they were not even in Angola. 61 mechs sat at Omuthia in southwest Africa, mothballed and unmanned, the crews sent back to the School of Armour after Operation Askari. On its way to the war, 61 mech drove past its own tanks. What it took instead was the Rattle 90. Against a T-54, it needed 6 or 7 hits, and it had to survive long enough to land them. That was the choice the Army had been living with. Go on killing T-54s 6 hits at a time, or send the tanks. Tuesday, 29th September 1987, Task Force 10 headquarters near Mavinga. State President P.W. Botha is being briefed, with Magnus Milan, Johnny Geldenhuys, and Lieutenant General Andreas Liebenberg, the man everyone called Cat. Botha asks why the army is not using the Olifants the country has spent so much money on. He is told the army had never expected politicians to authorize tanks at all, given the restrictions it worked under. Botha authorizes them and turns a defensive mandate into a counteroffensive. The squadron went to war on his order. On 3rd October, the Lamba settled what was left of the argument. Afterwards, Liebenberg, as chief of the army, ruled that 61 mech would never again be sent against tanks without tanks of its own. Finding them was the easy half. The gun was the hard one. The first rebuild had left it alone. The old 20-pounder was judged inadequate against what it would meet, and the version that followed carried a 105mm gun instead. The caliber is not the interesting part. What the crews did with it is. They chose their ammunition for the bush. The modern armor-piercing round was used sparingly, because a tree could deflect one. High-explosive anti-tank rounds could be set off early by branches too, but a hit was unmistakable and worked on anything. The crews loaded those and accepted the risk. In bush like this, tank against tank happened at 150 meters, often at 50. The gun was not being asked to reach out, but to kill the first thing that appeared at a range where nobody gets a second attempt. First shot or nothing. Schultz records which squadron got which. 61 Mech had the older version with the older gun. 4 SAI had the upgraded one, and its squadron did the killing. That was the whole capability. One squadron of trained crews, because that is all the School of Armor had been asked to produce. That is what an embargo does. It builds capability one squadron at a time, and that squadron is all there is. Officers gave a second reason those tanks had sat. An armored car crossing a border can be explained away in a press statement. A tank cannot. Before we get to the 2 kills 1 minute apart, and to the Cuban account that has 10 Olifants destroyed in a single afternoon on 14th February 1988. If you are enjoying this, hit subscribe. It takes a second, and it helps the channel. Now the Chambinga. Monday, 9th November 1987. Dense bush, 3 kilometers northeast of Fapla 16 Brigade's forward positions, near the source of the Chambinga River. At 7 minutes to 7, reconnaissance troops lying up near the brigade radio back that they can hear Fapla tank engines start. E Squadron is moving up behind the armored cars, under Major André Retief. Commandant Leon Moraes brings Combat Group Charlie in close. 2 companies of Ratels forward on the flanks, the tanks behind. At 10 minutes past 8, an Olifant fires and a T-55 stops. That kill is credited to Lieutenant Hein Fourie. At 11 minutes past 8, a second Olifant fires and a second T-55 stops. That one is credited to Lieutenant Aubrey Strauss. 1 minute apart, 2 tanks. No South African tank crew had done that since 1945. The armored cars that had carried this war needed 6 or 7 hits to do what those 2 guns had just done once each. Both timings come from the sitrep filed that day. Nobody in the tank squadron is hit in that contact. By the end of the day, Combat Group Charlie has 7 men killed and 9 wounded, and 1 Ratel destroyed, the one at the brigade's main position. An Olifant is hit and repaired where it stood. 16 Brigade never recovered. Counting this day, and the fighting on the 11th, Schultz, working from a translated Soviet account, concludes it was damaged past the point of functioning under one command. The case against these tanks had been political. 1 minute settled the part that was about the tank. The tank had stopped being the question. From that morning on, the only question was what it was pointed at. Thursday, 25th February 1988. The eastern slope of the Chambinga High Ground, moving toward the source of the Tumpo River, east of Quito Cuanavale. Commandant Mike Muller takes 61 mech up the high ground before first light, leading the main strike force for the first attack on Tumpo. Fapla's 25 Brigade is abandoning its positions as he comes up. The artillery finds him, and it is accurate. By his own account, MiGs are overhead all day, and while they are there, the South African guns cannot answer the shelling. Muller runs the battle from a turret whose gun will not fire. He stays in it and keeps the attack moving. The main force drives into a protective minefield. 4 tanks are stuck in it and out of the fight for the day. Of the whole battle group, only 32 Battalion makes contact. Light infantry raised largely from Angolans, who had fought on the losing side of their own civil war, under South African officers. 12 men are evacuated, 9 wounded, and 3 for stress. The attack is called off shortly after 6:30. The enemy was leaving the position. The attack failed anyway. Artillery stopped it, aircraft stopped it, and a minefield stopped it, and none of those was a problem the workshops could solve. But the war was also teaching the Olifant's limits, and none of them were in the turret. Wednesday, 23rd March 1988. The Tumpo Triangle, east of the Quito River, opposite Quito Cuanavale. The same ground, on the same axis, for the third time. Marius van Pletzen was a gunner in one of those tanks, with Regiment President Stain. By his account, the force moved up at 4 the previous afternoon to wait for first light. They go in through the dark with one mine roller in the formation, on the lead tank. UNITA infantry ride forward on the tank decks. SADF records describe the practice of pushing the maximum number of UNITA foot soldiers ahead to draw fire and locate targets. UNITA men called it being used as cannon fodder. Mortars find them first, then the minefield. Mines and accurate artillery hold them at a distance, and they never close with anyone. 3 tanks are severely damaged and abandoned where they sit. The force pulls back after several hours. No South African is killed. The last attack of the war ends without his gun finding a target. Cuban accounts of the fighting on 14th February 1988 have 10 Olifants destroyed in one afternoon. Szabo's total for the entire war is 3 tanks. These are the 3, and mines did it. The offensive stopped where those 3 stopped. There was no 4th attempt. There is one thing the wrecks at Tumpo cannot tell you about everyone else's tanks. The countries that could afford anything never brought one here. Britain's Chieftain was in service through all of this. So was West Germany's Leopard. Neither ever turned a track in southern Angola. Those armies had bought for a plane in Central Europe. Nobody was going to ask them what their tanks did in bush this thick. So the only tank that mattered in this war was the one on the other side, and the day it lost heaviest is usually told wrong. The version that circulates has 72 T-55s destroyed at the Lomba in a morning by armored cars. The signal filed to Army headquarters on 12 October 1987 in the Department of Defense archive records 17 vehicles destroyed, most of them T-54s. It was not a morning either. The fighting ran into the late afternoon, with 2 pauses to bring ammunition forward, and the artillery fired through both. Not one Olifant was on that field. Nobody would sell South Africa a tank, so South Africa had to be exact about what it did with the ones it already owned, and exact is what the rich armies never had to be. Being exact outlasted the war, and the government that fought it. In 1991, the Mark 1B superseded the Mark 1A, and that is where the rebuild stopped pretending. The hull was lengthened, torsion bars replaced the bogey units, 44 were built, 26 later brought up to Mark II standard. What is left is a shape a Centurion crew would recognize, and almost nothing under it they would. So here is the answer to the question from the start. 3 times. 3 times, an army was sent at the same prepared position on the same axis, and the blame never landed on the tank. The argument now is about the order. Cuban technicians have worked on South African armor under a contract signed in 2014. A presentation to Parliament in 2021 recorded 7 Mark IIs and 84 older Mark I's repaired. The 2 sides of Quito Cuanavale ended up sharing a maintenance schedule. The ground is not finished. Angola holds the largest minefield on the continent, and more than 1,000 remain to be cleared. On 16th July 2025, at Quito Cuanavale, Prince Harry helped Halo deminers destroy 2 South African anti-tank mines. It is cleared now, and a village stands on it. Monday, 9th November 1987, 10 minutes past 8. Southern Angola, 3 kilometers northeast of FAPLA 16 Brigade. A South African tank fires. It was built out of other armies' cast-offs, bought second-hand to replace the ones the country had already sold. It arrived with no turret and no gun, because the embargo allowed neither. Its first version carried a gun, judged inadequate against what it would meet. It sat mothballed, while the war it was built for went on without it. Its last attack ended in a minefield it never got through. Every criticism was correct. It looked wrong. It worked anyway. It worked at the Shambinga on the 9th of November. It worked at the Shambinga on the 11th. It worked on the Shambinga high ground in February. It works with one South African tank regiment today. Every part of the Olifant that could be replaced was replaced. What could not be replaced was the decision to send it at the same ground 3 times. So who do you hold responsible when the right machine is pointed at the wrong ground 3 times? The people who built it or the people who pointed it? Tell me in the comments. And if you want the other half of this story, the armored car that broke a Soviet-equipped brigade on the Lamba with no tank on the field, it is linked right here.